Hi, I'm Ty Devereaux, and this is the Devereaux Group, the financial arm of Devereaux Holdings, a platform exploring how capital, credit, and collaborative systems actually work, not as they are advertised, but as they operate. Because most people are introduced to finance through fragments, credit scores, interest rates, approvals, and unfortunately denials, but never the system itself. And when the system is misconstrued, the tools within it are misused. Nowhere is that more evident than with credit. Credit is not complex. It has been improperly engaged with at its introduction, presented as judgment. It was always designed to provide access, while ownership remained separate and distinct. Specifically, it was always about controlled access, not unrestricted opportunity. And once the difference between restriction and access is clear, the distinction becomes obvious. Credit stops feeling like a wall and starts to reveal its true potential. When credit is seen only as a restriction, it appears as a barrier meant to keep people out. In contrast, when viewed as access, it becomes a purposeful means for moving forward, such as using it strategically to build a war chest, to invest your way out of debt, or to lower rates to gradually grow beyond your current debt ceiling. The difference between seeing credit as restriction or as access determines how you engage with it, not as a weapon, but a tool. The misunderstanding of credit begins with identity. A number is assigned, a threshold established. Movement is either permitted or delayed. And from that point forward, people begin to internalize credit as a reflection of who they are. But credit was never designed to measure personal value or worth. Instead, it measures perceived trustworthiness in a financial context. The key distinction is between worth, personal value, and trust, financial reliability. Credit assesses the latter, not the former. It was designed to price trust, not individual value. That distinction between measuring worth and pricing trust is both operational and fundamental. Measuring worth presumes value judgment. Pricing trust focuses solely on financial confidence. It is essential to distinguish between these two roles when thinking about credit, because once credit is understood as structured trust, conditional, priced, and extended across time, the topic changes. The system is evaluating trust, and positioning determines the outcome. A credit score is not a verdict, it is a translation, not a decision, about your financial reliability, a compressed signal of behavior, risk, and expectation. We are not taught how to interpret credit scores. Credit scores range from 300 to 850. Above 700 is strong, below 600 can limit access or increase costs. The distinction: scores signal financial behavior, not personal worth or value. We are not taught that even poor credit can buy us enough time to transform information and relationships into better positioning. We are taught to protect credit, not utilize it. And in that mode, credit stops being a tool. It becomes something to avoid damaging instead of something to deploy. And that misunderstanding deepens when we assume that credit operates the same way everywhere. Credit as a concept is universal, but not mirrored. It is contextual. In the US, trust is informational. It is scored, quantified, standardized, and sold. A number becomes identity. But across much of Africa, Southeast Asia, and Latin America, what we call the developing world, trust is relational. It is built through repetition, observed through behavior, maintained through proximity. Not documented, remembered. There are no incomplete systems, only alternative architectures. One scales through data, the other through relationships. And now, emerging systems attempt to merge both through digital footprint, behavioral data, and alternative scoring. This reveals something more important than credit: trust. Trust shapes who receives access and how it's structured in every credit system. The distinction between credit and trust is critical. Trust is foundational. while credit is the mechanism. Every system recognizes a different form of trust, and anything it cannot recognize, it cannot fund. Nowhere is that structure more layered than in the United States. In the United States and much of Europe, credit is not a single system, it is a stack. At the surface is consumer credit, visible, standardized, widely discussed, but limited because it measures predictability, not leverage. Further up the food chain sits business credit, where identity shifts from individual to the entity. Now, trust is structural, built through relationships, trade lines, and network behavior. Beyond that, there's asset based credit. Collateral, not identity, becomes the basis for access. And above that sits institutional credit, where credit is negotiated, not requested. Each layer offers more access, but demands more understanding. Most people never move beyond the first, and because of that, they experience credit as a ceiling instead of a pathway. The difference is critical. A ceiling implies limitation, while a pathway implies progression. Recognizing what you experience is key to understanding your position in the system, because access alone isn't the epitome of real advantage. The question is not who gets credit. The question is how credit is understood and how it is used. Because what most people call bad credit is not a permanent condition, it's a position, a starting point within a system that was never fully explained. A card is issued, a loan is denied, or access arrives expensive, limited, and restrictive. From that moment, a conclusion is formed that the tool itself has no value, that it's bad. But that is not the structure. Even constrained credit, even high cost credit can be used. If it is used with intention, this is where discipline replaces emotion. Take something like a payday loan. On its surface, it is one of the most expensive forms of capital available. And if used carelessly, it is quite destructive. But used precisely, it can become transition. Not a solution, but a bridge. This is not about relying on high cost credit. It is about using it temporarily with precision to move into stronger positions. If that capital is used to free up liquidity, to create a space for a small controlled investment, or to stabilize a position that produces more than the cost of the loan, then even high cost credit can be converted into movement. But only under one condition: it must be paired with a plan, a defined use, a determined return, a defined exit. Because without structure, high interest credit does not build, it compounds against you. This is where most fail. Not because the tool is flawed, and it very may well be, but because the tool is used without timing, without discipline, without intention. Within the energy exchange, every use of credit must answer one question: what does this produce? If it produces nothing, it should not be used. If it produces something, it must produce more than it costs. And that production must be timed. Payments made early, balances controlled, profiles strengthened deliberately. Because the goal is never to remain in high cost credit. The goal is to move through it, from constrained access to secured credit, from secured credit to small limit cards, from small limit cards to expanded trust, step by step, signal by signal, until the system begins to reevaluate you, not based on where you started, but on how you moved. This is the shift. Bad credit is not a dead end, it is an undeveloped position. And when approached with discipline, structure, and timing, even the most limited access becomes usable, not as a destination, but as leverage in motion. Which brings us to the deeper structure, where credit actually lives. Credit does not exist in isolation. It sits at the intersection of four currencies: money, information, relationships, and time. Money determines cost, information determines terms, relationships influence access. But time? Time is what is actually being exchanged here. When you borrow, you're not accessing capital, you're pulling future capacity into the present. And once that claim is made, it must be honored, which means the real risk is not default. The real risk, well, that's misallocating time. Using borrowed money for short term gains means spending future capacity on the present or past. Borrowed time is lost to interest and repayment if it doesn't help you progress. What a catastrophic waste it is to use borrowed time on things that do not produce. Because time, once spent, well, time once spent doesn't return. And when that misalignment happens, credit changes full. Credit begins as access, but it does not remain accessible by default. It becomes what the system produces. And in many cases, that production is extraction. The borrower remains active, approved and engaged, but never progressing, never advancing. Payments are made, balances revolve, nothing compounds. This is not failure, it is structured, a system that circulates capital without transferring leverage. Over time, behavior adapts. Urgency replaces strategy, survival replaces positioning, and the borrower begins to operate within the system instead of questioning it. This is not loud, it's gradual, precise, and highly effective. But understood, the dynamic shifts. Most of us end up bludgeoned by our own tool because we mistook its purpose. Credit, in its highest form, is not survival, it's acceleration. It does not create value, it amplifies it. Attached to consumption, it depletes. Attached to production, it expands. To make this shift, use credit to build earning power, not just cover wants. For example, borrow to take a course or buy tools that help you earn instead of for routine or quick expenses. Before borrowing, ask, will this help me create more value in the future or just cover the present? This mindset moves you from dependency to progress. That is the dividing line, the distinction between using credit strategically and being managed by it. Clarity here determines your financial direction between using credit and being used by credit. Credit is never free money, it is rented time, priced by trust and governed by outcome. So the question is no longer how do I get access? The question becomes what does this access build? Because in the end, credit does not define your future. It reveals the system you're operating within, whether it's personal credit, business credit, or even institutional credit. If you want to go deeper into this work, you can find my long form writing on Substack at tydevereaux.substack.com and more breakdowns like this here on the Devereaux Group YouTube channel. Thanks for listening.